I guess the other thing that I wanted to just suggest, I mean, in a way, like, I don't know what the value of specific predictions are. Okay, there's two things I'll talk about before I turn it over to discussion. I mean, according to this Carl Johan Kalaman model in this book, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness, the year 2008 is going to be kind of the critical year for kind of a shift in paradigm. And it may be that a lot of the kind of negative entropic energies which are now kind of surrounding us come to a head at that point and expose themselves. And Kalaman suggests that it could be a very, very difficult time. I mean, in terms of this 20-year model, 2008 in this period corresponds to 1931 to 1950 in the previous stage, which was the Second World War, the Holocaust, atomic bombs, and so on. So that 1 year could be a very difficult period. But after that period, it could be that we would be able to, if there was a new paradigm available for people and a new template, that we might be able to transition into a kind of harmonic planetary culture and supersede a lot of the forms that are now kind of, I think, holding back a revolution. And I think that, like, I really ended up having a very positive vision of what this transformation could be and where we could go as a species. I think that we're in this amazing kind of strange attractor moment where there are these kind of basins of attraction, and one of them is kind of pulling us down into sort of barbarism, negativity, total resource depletion, and the other one would move us into compassion, generosity, I mean a kind of collective raising of consciousness, and full-on intention to sort of bring all of humanity together and upwards into a new order of consciousness and being. So it's it's definitely a war zone right now in terms of paradigms and possibilities. But I think it's a very fascinating time to be around and to be thinking about all this stuff and looking at it carefully. So I also wanted to mention what I've been engaged in. So I wrote this book, and what I've described is really as like one bandwidth of the book. It's a 400-page book. It's very dense. I mean, I have a few copies here if anybody wants to buy one while I'm here and have me sign it. I also talk about, in the book I look at a lot of phenomenon which is the mainstream won't even touch, like crop circles, alien abductions, various psychic manifestations. Really this whole concept of are there other forms of consciousness around that are somehow interacting with us. So it got very visionary and trippy and prophetic. But what I've been trying to do now is really much more fundamental, like really thinking about, if we're in this phase of transformation of consciousness, what kind of support systems or infrastructure is necessary to shift us from where we've been to where we could go. And at the moment I'm working on a business that we have initial funding for to do a membership program to support ecological, sustainable commerce. Using kind of ideas from this company Student Advantage, which was a card membership program for college kids. And the idea is to enroll people in EVO, and then they get access to all these discounts from businesses and can really rethink their purchasing habits. So, I mean, one simple example is like now you want to get a skateboard for your kid, you go out, you go to a skateboard store, you buy a skateboard. If you're a member of EVO, you'd get on EVO and you'd immediately get a list of skateboards that are made at different levels of sustainability. And so you could find a skateboard where it was sustainably harvested wood, non-toxic glues, made totally decently, and you could have a totally different investment in that product. So it's really the idea is how do you create an infrastructure to support a shift to and if you think about people's buying habits, that is really the first place where people are impacting the planet on a daily basis. But what I really see is if this instrument, this tool worked for people, it could rapidly scale up. So let's say we created this large-scale user base and membership base. You had a bunch of people who are interested in raw food. They could find out, would they discover there's 5 EVO members or users on the same block who all have interest in the same raw food? Well, they can then buy in bulk together. They can then, or they could invest in local organic farms. They're ensuring their supply of that product. Then they could find a biofuel vehicle that brings the product to them. So really trying to really figure out how we could encourage creative collaborations, because if this peak oil vision and so on is something that's going to come to pass, with the climate shift, we're going to really need to really figure out how to create collaborative, trust-based networks that work and can actually supplant and replace a lot of the kind of imposed superstructures that are now going. Yeah. So I don't know. Does that seem interesting?
Sure, I'll throw a question.
Yeah, cool.
Microphone for questions.
Oh, cool.
You point out that there are key moments in human history where something happened that changed everything. You mentioned where we learned about electricity, or going back before that where we harnessed the power of animals, or where we learned agriculture or whatever. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that one of the most important things that the human race has gotten is to learn how to use an essentially limitless form of energy, mm-hmm. in which the whole thing is scaled up literally by 1 million times, and that you can, instead of having to get tons and tons of material to burn or whatever you're going to do, and tons of waste to haul away, you've got this tiny bit. And yet most people who are thinking about the future as you are, a key unstated premise seems to be we've got to learn to use less and less energy. And that seems to me completely perverse, that energy is the mechanism by which living organisms utilize the materials of the earth to get what is needed. Why is it seem so alien not to look at this as a key thing that's going to move us to be able to do totally different things than we did before?
I don't think I really said anything about using less energy. I don't know. I admit where the limits of my knowledge is. I see that, I know from my own experience, as much as I know anything, that there's this psychic evolution happening. And I see this enormous transformative process. And I see a lot of potential for technologies. In the book, I sort of critique the Ray Kurzweil kind of technological singularity euphoria, because to me it seems a little bit ungrounded. And what we've actually discovered is that every new level of technology tends to have a new level of really horrific unintended consequences. So it's like, gee whiz, genetically modified food, amazing, too bad it spreads like wildfire and contaminates everything around it, So we haven't intensified our consciousness enough to where we can really think fully out the consequences of our actions. And, I have friends who are involved with this free energy stuff. I haven't seen a free energy device. I haven't seen it work. I certainly hope it does work, Once again, I could go into kind of projections of how I think this thing might go down, but it may not be worth it. A lot of things may become possible very quickly. But it may be that we go through this kind of really, really dangerous constriction period first, which is almost like the proving ground for this new level of consciousness. I'm very interested in this. Nietzsche became a big hero of mine writing the book. And Nietzsche has this line about how the deed creates the doer almost as an afterthought, And in a way, we've been kind of like in this kind of comfort zone, kind of surfing along. And now there's going to be this very intense proving time. And I think that that's going to be part of how this next level of consciousness gets found and established. And then once we go through that process, I do think it's quite possible that amazing things are going to happen. I camped at Burning Man. I go to every year. I camped with this nanotechnologist from MIT. He showed me this thing. It's like they're growing carbon nanotubes. They can grow them on metal plates. This tiny little thing. These incredibly complex sacred geometrical patterns. I couldn't believe it. He said that, if we could do this, we could grow buildings like this, in a certain number of years. So I think there's this point where technology is going to definitely play a part in it. But for me, I also really see the technology as being a kind of externalized manifestation of what's ultimately a psychospiritual process that humanity is going through. And it's this movement to this next level of consciousness. Once we're established in that level, then we'll have a whole other different form of technology, a different form of manifestation.
Your thoughts on developing and scaling up psychedelic medicine in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I think that the psychedelic experience, for my own process, was very important. I don't think that it's something that everybody has to do or must do, or should do. I think that there could be a situation where the availability of psychedelics to more people would be a positive thing if there was a good container for it. And for me, I'm really happy about this ayahuasca church decision, because I think, Santo Daime was the group that I worked with in Brazil, and I think it's a really wonderful container for having this experience of non-ordinary consciousness. There's also breath work and drumming and other techniques for achieving non-ordinary consciousness that don't involve medicines or drugs. So I don't know how it's going to come back into the culture. I feel that it is beginning to come back into the culture, and certainly this John Hopkins study and the sort of media reaction to it and other things to me have suggested a kind of receptivity and openness to the possibility of somehow bringing the psychedelic realm back into the mainstream. But I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. And I ended up there's a group called MAPS, Multidisciplinary Approach to Psychedelic Studies, and they've been very much interested in kind of the medical model, like the scientific model. And I still am a little bit more in favor of this kind of shamanic model. I feel like it's a little more true to the experience, which has in a way like chaos and unknown possibility like at the center of it. I feel more comfortable in the hands of a tribal shaman than I would in a doctor with a lab coat, when it comes to a psychedelic experience. So I don't know. It's going to be. I'm as interested as anybody to see what happens with this right now. If there's a real opening here, or if it's something that there's going to be shutting down again, as happened in the '60s.
When you were in Africa, you explained your experience where you were shot suddenly into another realm. Did you have any control at that point over yourself? And then you said after a certain amount of time you came back and there you were. Did you have any control over ending it?
Well, you're kind of confusing two experiences. But they both had, both of them were very intense. In Africa it was Iboga, which was this long-lasting psychedelic, and there were definitely parts of that experience where I was basically laid out flat. But I was also present to if I opened my eyes, I was present to the normal reality. With DMT, dimethyltryptamine, it's very, very short-acting, and at the most intense point of it, you're just literally not in the room. Your friends, if they're with you, are watching over your body, but you are just out in this other reality, and then you come crashing back into this one. So during that really intense phase, you definitely don't have control. You're just out.
Is there any particular event that's going to transpire in 2012?
Well, there is this astronomical alignment of the Earth and the sun rising at the dark rift in the center of the Milky Way. And I just discussed it a little bit, this idea that might be this kind of cosmic crossing or some kind of galactic equator. This is, as I said, I'm not as good as expressing this as John Major Jenkins is. If you want to follow up on it, this book, The Maya Cosmogenesis, is I think, excellent. But that basically, there seems to be this kind of galactic equator that we're crossing over. This event is that crossing, and it might be a kind of field effect reversal takes place, that we move from kind of this densified physical realm to more like a psychophysical form of manifestation. I don't know. It's interesting. He did a lot of research. I think it's a good book.
Here, let me ask a question, and then we'll come to the back. So, what's going to happen between now and 2012?
Yeah, well, I mean, I sort of like, I don't want to just conjecture